Hello and welcome to The Actor and the Engineer. My name is Paul James. I am the actor.
My name is Josh Knapp. I'm the broadcast engineer.
Here we go, Josh. I'm super excited about this.
I bet, I just knowing that we were going to talk about Fight Club we're going to frame this in a particular way. I guess we'll just kind of call it our From Page to Screen series. We're not going to do like a bunch all in a row, but we'll hopefully come back to this every once in a while. We're going to take a look at David Fincher's 1999 film Fight Club, but with through the lens of how everybody, the screenwriter, David Fincher, actors, everybody interpreted the source material, which was Chuck Palahniuk's novel Fight Club. So, and it had come out like, I don't know, maybe 4 years before, something like that. I think it'll be interesting. I just recently reread Fight Club, and have you done that recently also?
Yes, absolutely. Literally just finished it earlier today. Well, let's give a little bit of backstory. First of all, let's let everybody know that I'm still in Maryland, so the sound quality on my side is not going to be as great as the sound quality on Josh's side. So
I can
we're
make
still.
myself sound worse. Do you want me to do that?
Yes, please do.
Okay.
No, I'm totally good with it. I just always think, I'm that type of person who listens to a podcast and then doesn't listen for like a month to 6 weeks, or listens to a band and don't listen for a while, and then I go back and listen again. And sometimes when you pick up things on YouTube, the quality is not the greatest. And some people just don't have the quality instruments to use, if you will. So, but you know, bear and get through it. And so I just want people to know that there is a reason why it is sounding the way that it is if they've just tuned in after not listening to us for a while, which they shouldn't do anyway. But if they are doing that, that's why. And this idea came from my niece, who was suggesting that we read a book and then talk about the movie, or vice versa. She's an avid reader, my niece Jackie, who I'm actually quarantined with in Maryland. And I was reading Room, and she said, "Oh, we should watch that together again." And I said, "I don't know." And she said, "Well, you're gonna read it." Because for whatever reason, I went to Target and I was looking for a book to read before like severe lockdown happened. And I took a vow of watching a play a month last year, and I was in two plays. And I did that. I actually saw 14 plays, plus we're
Wow.
in two plays. And yeah, and this year, because I thought, why not? If I give myself a goal, instead of a New Year's resolution being something taking away from myself, or wanting to lose weight or deprive myself of something, I like to add to my life. So I
Hmm.
said, okay, well, why don't I read 12 books this year, one a month, which is not a lot, but I can be an avid reader, and sometimes I can go 6, 9 months without reading anything. And then I'll read everything in sight. Then I won't read again for another 3 months. Thus the scenario about listening to podcasts the way that I do. Anyway, so she said, well, why don't you go ahead and talk about Room, the movie, after you read the book? And I made that suggestion to you. You made the comment about, well, maybe we shouldn't talk about, somebody who are in a 14 by 11 room, sequestered, quarantined, for lack of a better term, during this worldwide pandemic. And I was like, oh, yeah, you're probably right. And then I said, but I think this is a good idea for a podcast idea, From Page to Screen, if you will, which you just named it, book to movie, if you will. And so I was like, well, what about Fight Club? Because I knew you had read Fight Club and had seen Fight Club. And I love the hell out of this movie. And I had already read it before. So I thought, well, this will be interesting. Well, why don't we do Fight Club? And you were like, absolutely. So we both just recently read Fight Club. And now, did you just recently watch it again?
Oh my gosh. This is so, yes, I did. And there's somewhat of a story behind that too. As I was rewatching this movie, I flashed back to my history with this movie, and I think that this movie has a lot to do with my interest in filmmaking. And the reason why is because I didn't see this movie in the theater. I just recently texted you a picture of some theater stubs, like movie ticket stubs from weirdly enough, like I was going through a bunch of, we just recently moved, going through a bunch of boxes, found this thing that was like my senior scrapbook or whatever, and I kept all of the, well, I say all, probably all, but I'm sure I missed some, the stubs from going to the movies in 1998 and 1999, my senior year. And so I had a bunch of these in there, and two of them were, one of them was The Matrix, which I saw in the theater in like April or whenever it came out, or May, whatever. And then the other one was Eyes Wide Shut, which I took my girlfriend to, which was a bad idea. But anyway, it didn't last. But I have no idea if that's what, if me taking her to Eyes Wide Shut had anything to do with us breaking up. But one movie I did not see in the theater was Fight Club. And that's because I didn't really know anything about it. It came out when I was in my freshman year in college. And so I just had other stuff I was doing and I just didn't see it. So when it came out on DVD and I rented it, I was like, oh my gosh, this is crazy. This is really, really good. And then I found that I had just bought a DVD player like less than a year before, because DVD players in 1998, 1999 they were fairly expensive. I got a really good deal on one because I worked at Best Buy. So I had a DVD player and I was like just starving for DVDs to watch and to buy. And they had this special edition, collector's edition, whatever, of Fight Club that looks like it's in a paper bag. I don't know if you've ever seen that DVD, but it's a 2-disc set, and it is one of the most deluxe DVDs that you will ever find. And it's not like a Criterion version, because they didn't do like Criterion DVDs back then. They were still doing Criterion Laserdiscs back then in 1999. But they did an amazing job. 20th Century Fox did an amazing job with the DVD. There's all kinds of Easter eggs in there, little things, the warning screen at the front, where it says like, attention, if you copy this, then you will go to jail and all this stuff. Then they added in their own, like the producers of the DVD added in their own, like, if you're reading this, then know that you are part of a corporate, it's just a spurting Tyler Durdenisms throughout the whole menu process of watching navigating through the DVD. And then within that DVD, there are 4 audio commentaries. So I've probably listened to this movie almost more than I've listened to any other movie. And whether it was when I was younger, I would just like put it on when I was going to bed, and I would just like turn on one of the commentaries and just listen to it. And the David Fincher commentary for this movie and all the movies that he's done commentaries for, they're infinitely listenable. They have so much information. He knows exactly what to say, when to say it. I don't know if it's just meticulously edited, which, knowing David Fincher, it is. The commentary is. So I loved all of his commentaries, and this was the first one that I'd ever listened to. Not only does it have a commentary from him, it's got one from Brad Pitt, Edward Norton, Helena Bonham Carter, and David Fincher. It's got one from Chuck Palahniuk, the writer of the novel, and Jim Uhls, who's the screenwriter, together talking about the difference between the book and the screen, which I'm sure we'll get into. And then, it's also got production designers and all these other people, graphics artists. All these people are in a separate one. So, and I've listened to all of them. And just recently, I've watched the movie and listened to those first 3 commentaries I talked to you about. So I've been steeped in Fight Club over the last week or so. It's been a lot of Fight Club. So, but fun.
When you texted me the picture of The Matrix and Eyes Wide Shut ticket stubs from when you took your girlfriend to see Eyes Wide Shut and when you saw The Matrix, you said something along the lines of, that probably wasn't such a good idea. And I texted something sarcastically back, like, you think, or something like that. And I was like, wait, did you just take her to see that movie because you really wanted to see that movie because it's a Kubrick film and you weren't really thinking, and then you got stuck in that film? And I thought, well, there you go. Be careful what you wish for, man, because that's not a date movie. But at the same time, I can't imagine what it would have been like to take any significant other. And you guys had only been dating for like 3 months, right?
Yeah, it was a very short relationship. Yeah, we'd only been dating for like 3 months and then we broke up like a month later. But I mean, for other reasons. But yeah.
Yeah, I was not going to say that it's because of the movie, but I just think it's like, that's such a perfect movie scene right there. Like, who would have, a guy who's semi-obsessed with Kubrick, and we can now say obsessed in the best kind of way with Kubrick. And, I've got to see this movie. And you're not thinking what that might mean to anybody else other than the fact that you need to see this movie. So let's make it a date night. Yay. And then you watch that.
Yeah, and also that was like I would not go to movies by myself back then. So now I have no problems going to movies by myself. But yeah, back then I was like, you just can't go to a movie by yourself. But turns out it's fine. You're not gonna like fall into a pillar of salt if you go see a movie by yourself. It's perfectly
I
fine.
prefer it. I've never had a problem seeing a movie by myself. I don't really. Actually, let's not say I prefer it. If I'm with somebody, I'm fine. If I'm not with somebody, I'm just as fine. I'm okay with it. So, well, let's
Yeah.
get into it. How do you want to
All right.
proceed with this?
Well, I mean, I think we should start with the fact that this is Chuck Palahniuk's first published novel. So I mean, this is kind of his first foray. He's a very successful writer since then, but this was kind of his like flag in the ground as far as his writing style is concerned. And it is a bold writing style, and a lot of the verbiage that you hear in the movie is directly taken from his novel. And it may be jumbled around, moved from place to place, not exactly chronological, that whole thing, but it's still, the essence is definitely still felt. So I think as far as this is concerned, this is not a based on the novel. This is a representation of the novel, a visual representation of the novel with other people involved. I mean, any film's going to have multiple influencers changing and modifying the source material, but I think it still has a good backbone of the original novel, and the novel fleshes out certain things, adds certain things, and after watching the movie post reading the novel again, I think that they picked the right spots to take out, and the parts that maybe were either less cinematic or much more difficult to display on screen, and they threw those away, but they kept the ultimate things. I think they also added some really big scenes that helped to consolidate a lot of what the book was doing, and to kind of shove all that into a 2-hour movie.
Well, I would say it was based on the book because it is as similar to a book to screen that I've ever seen in my life, with the exception of The Color Purple. The Color Purple, of course, is just a bunch of letters. Not to say that's a bad thing. The book is the letters of the sister to the other sister. That's the whole book. And what he was able to capture, Spielberg was able to capture, is the closest thing that I've ever read that was put on the screen. Now, granted, both times I saw The Color Purple, then read The Color Purple, and then have seen The Color Purple again since. And now, same with Fight Club. I saw Fight Club, read Fight Club, and have seen Fight Club a gazillion times, and now I've read Fight Club again. And I would venture to say that 95% of the dialogue is from the book. You are correct. They do move things around, and they do give certain things to certain characters that don't necessarily say it, but all the way down to Marla singing the Valley of the Dolls song.
Yeah.
Gotta get off. That's in the book. Almost verbatim lines. The things that
Yeah.
they add line wise and or character development wise are very minimal in my opinion. And the one or two things that they did add are some of my favorite things in the movie, in particular when they meet on the plane. That
Hmm.
whole interchange between Edward Norton and Brad Pitt. And let's just go ahead and say, if anybody's not seen Fight Club, please see Fight Club. This is a movie if you enjoy films, this is a movie you should have seen by now. Not to say that it's a bad thing that you haven't, but it has become and is an important film in the lexicon of films in this country and in this world and in our existence. Plus, I'm also deeply in love with this movie. It's in my top 10 favorite films of all time, so I'm not exactly objective, but see this movie. But spoilers from this point on, because if you have not seen this movie, you cannot know the things that we're talking about. If you don't know about it and you can go into it blind, you should. Because when you discover things in the film, when the characters and everybody else are discovering things, it is powerful. And that was one of the things that happened to me. I had no idea about this movie. This movie came and went in its first release, and I saw it at a dollar theater a couple of months after its release. Now, I heard about it, and I heard there was controversy, and I heard that people were really upset about it, and that I heard a lot of different stuff about this film. I don't really pay attention to stuff like that. But when I saw this movie and you find out the twist, I literally came out of my seat, and I tell the same story every time I talk about this movie. I came out of my seat and I was like, wait, what? I mean, I literally said that out loud. And I'm looking around at people going, did you see this coming? Because I'm really good at figuring things out. It's just an instinct I have. I have an instinct about something's not right. I had no idea it was coming, none whatsoever. So the few things that they altered from the book to make it a movie really is just condensing scenes to the core of what they are. I did not remember this from reading the book. The thing that I remember the most about reading the book was where Paper Street Soap Company first got their fat to make soap. Mm-hmm. That I remember from the book. It comes from Marla's mom. And I always thought that was funny, not a necessity, because they do explain later on in the movie where they do get it from, which also comes from the book too. And there's that great scene where he's like, he's selling their own fat asses back to them, because then he sells the soap that he makes from liposuction and from the clinic where they get bags of gross, large, red-looking fat, congealed-looking fat bags. And one breaks open. It's a great scene. So that was something that I remember when I read the book. I thought, oh, that's clever. Not a necessity per se, but that's clever. What I don't remember is how Tyler Durden and the narrator first meet, Edward Norton and Brad Pitt. In the book, they meet on a nudist beach. I don't remember that at all. And when I was reading it, I was like, huh, interesting. Now, I love the scene when they meet on the plane in the movie. It's my favorite scene in the movie by far, because you got the Hindu cow line, which comes from the book, but you also have that whole interchange about you're the most interesting single serving friend I've ever met. And he goes, what? And he goes, I have this thing about, oh no, I get it. Clever. And Edward Norton goes, what? And Brad Pitt goes, how's that working out for you? He goes, what? Being clever. It's the funniest interchange in the whole movie. I love that.
Yeah. That's awesome.
Was written for the movie. I didn't do it justice, but I never do. People who know the movie get the point. So when I realized in the book they met on a nudist beach, he falls asleep, wakes up, and there's Tyler Durden moving driftwood around to make it look like some kind of shadow of a hand is cast over this driftwood that he pulls out of the water, and he makes this little design in the sand. And when the sun reflects off of it, it looks like it's a hand, and he's sitting in the middle of it.
Yeah, but only for that. And the whole point of this is for a particular moment, for a short moment, do all of them line up to form the shape of the hand, and then it's gone.
Right. Now, speaking from the gay man's perspective, the whole idea of Edward Norton and Brad Pitt meeting on a nudist beach, hey, I mean, you could have at least shot it and put the DVD extras. I mean, you didn't necessarily have to cut it out completely, but from a cinematic, I mean, the whole idea of that is like, whoa. But from a cinematic point of view, it's unnecessary. So I understand why they moved it to the airplane, because that takes 4 or 5 things that happen in the book and blends it into one. You see him wake up again after he explains what he does for a living, the narrator, because that's how Edward Norton is listed in the movie credits, as the narrator. You see him wake up. He explains the whole thing that he does with his job to the one lady. He wants a crash to happen. All of that happens, and then he wakes up one time and there's Tyler Durden. So for cinematic purposes, it's quite brilliant that they moved that scene to the scene inside the plane. Different, but still smart.
Yeah, you're right. It is. How do you consolidate all of these things into the smallest amount of screen time possible? And then also, how do you have an impact of a character the first time you see that character, a really important character? Now we've gotten flashes of that character from the beginning of the movie, where they're using those subliminal blips of Tyler Durden, single frame blips of Tyler Durden being inserted into the movie, to the point where right before we see him in the scene on the plane, he's riding opposite directions on the walkway in the airport. So that it is a little bit more obvious than the subliminal blips of Tyler Durden. But another really important scene, but also scene that's different than the book, is right after the narrator, right after in the movie he's Jack, but in the book he's Joe. But as far as like I am Joe's raging bile duct, it's they had to change it for various reasons. But
They had to change it for what reasons?
they had to change it because it was a real thing in Reader's Digest. There was a whole series of these I am
Oh.
Joe's, yeah, I am Joe's prostate. I am whatever. Yeah, I get cancer. I kill Joe. But anyway, so it was Joe in the book because he was referencing a real thing in Reader's Digest, but in the movie they can't, since Reader's Digest is still around, I guess, or was around when the movie was made. They couldn't do that. They couldn't clear that. And so they couldn't have any association with Reader's Digest. So they had to change Joe to Jack. So that they're like, hey, we have no idea what Reader's Digest is talking about. This has nothing to do with what happened in real life in the past, even though
So
the book
why
was
doesn't a
based on that.
book have to do that? Why doesn't a book have to clear that?
I think images. It's there's images because in fact the periodical that he's reading when Marla and Tyler are getting it on right above him is called the Annotated Reader. It's not called Reader's Digest, and that's what those are the stacks that the hoarder who had the Paper Street house before Tyler had all over the place. So that's what he was reading through, and so it's supposed to be alluding to Reader's Digest in a roundabout way, but it can't be Reader's Digest. Just like you can't use brand name things without their, you can't use Nikes without Nike saying okay, or an iPhone without Apple saying okay, or whatever. They did have corporate tie-ins. In fact, Pepsi's all over the place in the movie, but
Starbucks.
yeah, Starbucks too. Yeah. Anyway, the scene that I'm trying to that I'm getting to is the discussion that they have after his or after his apartment blows up in the bar, and that discussion is kind of a consolidation of all of these individual lines that Tyler peppers at him throughout the beginning of their relationship, and it's a and it also is not directly taken from the book. It's the essence of those things. There's nowhere in there where they talk about Lorena Bobbitt or the Martha Stewart or do you know what a duvet is? That's not in the book, but it's the concept of consumerism and the concept of using how he only had mustard in his refrigerator because he's not an adult. He doesn't know how to cook for himself. He doesn't know how to get things in his fridge that he can use for later on. He's just treading water, and at the same time, he knows what a duvet is because he is focusing on setting up this environment for himself that is how he defines himself as opposed to what he does or what his passions are. He doesn't have any passions, I guess. So he's still trying to figure out who he is as a person. But that consolidates all those things into one scene, and then we get to the fight scene right after that, or the first fight scene after that. So it's very well done, and it is in some ways you can kind of dismiss it because he's talking in a lot of kind of like platitudes, and he also even dismisses it in the movie. He says all this stuff, and then he's like, and then Brad Pitt's like, I don't know, I could be wrong. Maybe you're all of that stuff really means a lot.
Yeah, maybe I don't know what I'm talking about. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. But and so he's able to have a get out of jail free card as far as all the stuff that he just said, even though he really does believe that. So it's a well done scene, especially when it seems like Pollinuk has a way of like riding this wave of I'm just gonna say, especially with the voiceover that he uses in the book, the narration that he uses in the book, it is he finds different ways to insert in this kind of like I'm above the fray type of a thing, and he uses a lot of that, especially at the beginning with the cancer support groups and all the different types of support groups that he goes to. In fact, I highlighted a couple of these, and he said, and I think this was in the movie too. He says, I was the warm little center that the life of the world crowded around when he was in those support groups. And it had to do with him being the only person there who didn't have anything wrong with him, quote unquote, wrong with him, as they did. But Chuck Palahniuk even said, like in his commentaries and other interviews and stuff, that when he did this as a as a volunteer, would take people to these things, because he really did this. He would volunteer to take people to their support groups. When he went to work the next day at his boring job, like like a job that the narrator would have had, he felt so much better about himself because he wasn't like, he didn't have those the problems of those other people. So it's also a really, I mean, it's kind of like a gross and reductive way to think. I think he was doing that fully for himself, and he got to a certain point where he meets Marla Singer, and that's not enough. So I mean, he has to generate this whole nother thing. So that's why you're right. This would not work without the Marla Singer character. It's we haven't even talked about her yet, but I think that that character is the impetus for the fight clubs and the rest of the book and the rest of the movie.
Well, she's an outward representation of what he feels internally. She represents. He says it in the book. He says it in the movie. You're a tourist, and if your lie reflects my lie, and I can't do this while you're there because I can't openly cry about something I don't have because you're openly crying about something you don't have, and it reflects upon each other. It's interesting. Did you, in your copy of the book, does it have the afterword in it at the end of it?
Yeah.
Okay. I don't know if I read that originally, and I don't know if that was in the original copy that I have. I don't think it was, because he talks about Brad Pitt, Helena Bonham Carter, and Edward Norton. He talks about fashion becoming Fight Club fashion and people sewing razor blades into jackets. Did all that really happen? Was there this fashion Dolce and Gabbana thing where all of a sudden they're on London runways and it was Fight Club chic? Well, that is just I don't know what that's called. That's just the epitome of irony. In that afterword, he says, Chuck Palahniuk says, I just added everything into the story I could possibly add into it. I think he says something along the lines of he had a hard time sleeping. That's where that idea came from. A story about somebody was telling at a dinner party became a story that was put into the book. And he talks about how there's some culture that's been doing this same kind of Fight Club ceremony in their village for thousands of centuries. And it's not a new idea that he had. He just put everything into this book that he ever thought was a really good idea. What's clever about it is he was really good at structuring his ideas into a story. The reason why I brought all that up was because he talks about being interviewed, and he was asked about this and he was asked about that. And he was approached by somebody who said, Fight Club is this. And somebody who said, oh, this is just our imagination, and Fight Club is this. And then he had a gay guy come up to him and say, it's just a metaphor for men watching other men having sex. And he's like, okay, yeah, that's what it was. And so he says in those afterwards that no one ever asked me if this was a romantic movie. And for whatever reason, that stuck in my head, I guess because I finished reading the book and then watched the movie today. And maybe that was in my head when I was watching it. But I did notice this time that it really is a very strange romantic comedy in a twisted kind of way. And the interesting thing about that for me is back in the day when that VHS tape first came out, it was before I had the DVD, they added extras onto the end of the VHS tape, and it was the trailers for the movie. And somebody said to me, there's a romantic comedy trailer for Fight Club. I go, no, there is not. And he goes, yes, there is. And he showed me all of the trailers from Jack's point of view, or the narrator's point of view, for lack of a better name, from Tyler Durden's point of view, from a Fight Club, society says this, you should be this, but really, it's this Fight Club. And then it was a trailer, I swear to God, that said there was a young man by the name of Tyler. Then there was a young woman by the name of Marla. Their paths met one night. And it's this romantic comedy trailer that they cut for this movie. Now, I don't know if they used these trailers or if these trailers were made just to make a point at the end of the tape. But I thought to myself, it's interesting what a writer thinks his work is versus what the world takes it on and makes it, or the individual takes it on and makes it about. Because I've always seen homosexual overtones in this story, always. And I was like, okay, is that me putting that on there, or is that really there? Well, come to find out, Chuck Palahniuk came out in 2008 in an interview. He was being interviewed by somebody and made reference to his partner, and the interviewer said, "What?" And he kind of was like caught in it now, and he was afraid that this interviewer was going to out him, so he decided just to out himself. So he did a interview with I can't think of the name of Advocate, and came out. And so he is a gay man, and I thought, well, is this something I'm seeing in this book, or is it there? Was it there because he is? I'm not sure, but what I find fascinating about it is he says in the afterword that no one asked him if it was a romantic movie. And then I watched the movie again and I was like, well, of course it is, because he really does say, he says it in the book and he says it in the movie, Marla, I really like you.
Mm-hmm.
And I think she says it to him. I really like
At the
you.
end,
Can't say
yeah,
it's love yet.
she does.
Yeah, I really like you. And he says that to her in the movie in the restaurant. And she goes, you do? And then at the very end of the movie, they're holding hands. And I never noticed it. And I've seen this movie, I'd say a dozen times, if not more. I never noticed at the end of the film, they turn and look at each other. And it kind of is a little heart shape form that they have with their hand. I never noticed it before. Now, let me say this. It might be something I'm reading into it, but I really saw it this time. And I thought, it's interesting to me that a writer says one thing or has one thing in mind and the rest of the world does what they do. You know, I can't even get into the whole fashion thing about, you know, Project Runway, Project Mayhem things. I can't even comprehend that, because
that's consumerism, though.
Stuff based on, right, exactly. They missed the point, though.
Exactly.
They missed at least the point I got from the book, you know? Fascinating.
I think that as a novelist, he's going to be, as any artist, whether you're a novelist or filmmaker, any part of the filmmaking process, you're going to be, you know, you want to make something that people will react to. And I mean, hopefully, I mean, the worst art is art that is benign. So his art, his book, and this film, Fincher's film, and the acting choices made in here, the lighting choices made, all the way down, the advanced use of CGI in certain scenes, it's all art, and it's meant to elicit a reaction. And I think that they all did exactly what they set out to do. But I think that at the center of this is, you're right, it's a simple story. It's just a simple story told in an unorthodox way, and it really is, you know, boy meets girl, boy creates alter ego, boy kills alter ego to save girl type of a story, because he really has no reason to live at the end of the movie, especially, but at the end of the book, he doesn't really have any reason to live either, but other than the fact that he needs to save Marla, and he's determined that is the most important thing. Because as far as the credit card company buildings and all that stuff, like he'd probably be fine, you know, all of them blowing up. But the fact that Marla is too close to this building is enough for him to, you know, to go through all of this and confront Tyler Durden, confront the Brad Pitt version of himself to get her to safety, or to make it so that she's not gonna die. But I mean, it's a pretty basic story, but at the same time, it has all of these different kind of built-in things. And I think that the people that made it are, I mean, David Fincher has a very cynical tone, and he looks at this. I think that it was not the whole fact of a huge conglomerate company, you know, 20th Century Fox, giving him millions upon millions of dollars to make this movie, that fact was not lost on him. He understood the irony in that, where, I mean, they have corporate tie-ins, you know, they've got Pepsi stuff everywhere. So, I mean, people are making money on this, and all of the things that Brad Pitt is saying are being counteracted by even just the marketing of the film. So you have to kind of get yourself into a space of seeing what they're saying on screen, and then understanding what they're meaning, but then also understanding that there's a whole nother level of kind of like just taking the piss out of it, just not taking it seriously, not taking what he's saying seriously. So yeah, I don't know, that's infinitely more interesting to me now, 20 years later, than it was when I saw it for the first time, because I was like wrapped up in those concepts. I didn't really espouse any of those concepts. In fact, it was kind of a weird thing. That whole, my freshman year, I was a part of a Christian fellowship group, and there was a subset of that group that made a Fight Club. Like, there were other, Fight Club things going on at the time, just because they were, I guess it was the cool thing to do, but it was the wrong, like, it was always the wrong, for the wrong, it's never the right reason, I guess. There's really no reason to punch somebody, even if they want you to punch them in the face. Like, I don't know. It just seems like there's probably more constructive ways to interact with people. But at the same time, like, there was a subset of people, and it was somewhat semi okay with the leadership. And it's like, I don't know what they're doing.
Okay, wait, slow down just a second.
Yeah.
Okay, so in the afterword, he says something like that. He says something about some Christian group that started their own Fight Club.
Well, he wasn't talking about our Christian group. I mean, I'm sure it was all over the country, but yeah.
No, of course not. If he was, wow. No, of course not. That's not my point. My point is that I find it crazy that you actually know a group of people who did this, and they would gather together and watch each other fight, like in Fight Club, like fist fight.
I was never a part of it, and I think they had boxing gloves or something. I don't know. But it was just
in the name of God.
I think what it was a because it was very, and a lot of, I mean, there's something to be said about having groups of men together or groups of women together, like only men or only women, because there may be certain things that, even if you're in a committed relationship with someone, you may not be able to talk to them about certain things. They might not relate to you in the same way. So it's good to have groups that are either of the same sex or, in the same situation as you, whether it's like, I don't know, an age group, from X number of years to X number of years, whether it's like, 20 to 40 or 60, 60 plus or whatever, because you're going to be working on things together.
Yeah.
And so I think that this was another one of the things that the men's group could do, or the guys group could do, or whatever. I don't know. I was never invited, and I didn't want to go. It was just a subset of people, but it seemed like they heard about the movie and then were like, oh, so it's just like dudes getting together and punching each other. Okay, let's do it. And it seemed edgier than just like, I don't know, playing football, like it seemed like it was something a little bit, more dangerous.
Well, I think that's why this book and this movie are what it is. This is why I think it's going to last the test of time, because Fincher tapped into something based on Chuck Palahniuk's book that is something, I think he even says in the book, primeval, where it's just part of your DNA that you've tapped into this, and that people need to express themselves in certain ways. So I just think, I just thought it was crazy, because I felt his kind of sarcastic irony about the statement about a Christian God-fearing group that started a Fight Club. I felt it when he wrote it in the afterword, but to actually hear that it actually existed, it's not that I didn't believe him. It's just to actually hear a first-hand witness of it, meaning that you heard about it, not necessarily.
No. I mean, I walked. They were in the quad at one night. I mean, I walked right past. Oh yeah.
Oh well, I think that's why, regardless of the corporate tie-ins of the movie And once again, the irony of Fincher directing $1 million budgeted film about subversive behavior, that's exactly what human nature needs sometimes. Because you can be mainstream, but still be subversive. I can't build all of this stuff that would be good for the environment. Now, given the right resources and the right financial backing, I would choose to do those things in my house if I could. Okay. But there are ways to be subversive to consumerism that are on a personal level. Yes, I do recycle. Yes, I do take it seriously. Yes, I do take the labels off. Yes, I do take the liquid out of the bottles. Yes, I do rinse them all off. Yes, I understand that a lot of that stuff might not be going to where it says that I'm going, but I also don't buy certain products because there might be too much plastic. I don't use plastic bags. I use paper bags. I'm sure they're all bad for you on some kind of level. And I'm sure I'm only like spinning my wheels, but on some level, it's my way of being, hey, we got to slow down because I think we do need to be environmentally aware. And I think we are doing stuff to the planet that we could not have an impact on the planet if we didn't want to. But that goes back to like being a Boy Scout and leaving the campground cleaner than you found it, as if you were never there. That's been ingrained in me. So you would spend hours, not hours, but as a kid, it seemed like hours. You would spend a long amount of time after you break down the tents and put everything away and cleaned everything up and put it all in the car. You would spend quite a while walking around the campground area, looking for wrappers or something that might catch fire if the fire's not out, all this stuff. So you left the environment better than you found it, as if you weren't there. So in a way, that's being subversive because you're trying to not take away from the earth. You're trying to just leave it the way it was. So in a way, I think Fincher making this movie is actually making a movie about this kind of behavior with all of these tones of commercialization in it is quite subversive and quite brilliant because it's a way of saying, hey, wait, do we really need that cup of Starbucks, that $5 cup of Starbucks? Do we really need to eat all of those products and be so wasteful? Do we really need to do it? But I guess the bottom line is that it is hard in this world to be completely 100% anti-commercialization and consumerism. It's hard because I like the movies and I like popcorn at the movies and I like watching Netflix and I like buying things on Amazon. And I know they're all got their thing where they're adding not so great stuff to the world. But at the same time, it's like, where do you draw the line? Here's what I'm saying. In the movie, they get on the bus, Brad Pitt and Edward Norton get on the bus and they're talking about sizing everybody up as they're traveling around. And by the way, I never noticed until this time, and maybe because it was fresh reading the book, that the bus driver nods to him when he gets on the bus. I never noticed that before.
And his nose is all busted up.
And I never noticed that before either. Yeah. I love that. After 20 years, 20 years of this movie, you notice new things after watching it so many millions of times.
The guy that pushes past them right before they move on to the next scene has long hair, and he says something like, excuse me, or get out of my way, or whatever. He's the guy who Brad Pitt is pummeling his nuts in the next scene.
Yeah. And do you know that the priest who's walking by the garage who gets wet is another guy in a Fight Club scene? I didn't know that. He's the guy who like hugs the guy from behind. Yep. And you see his face. And I was like, oh, that's that priest. That's great. Because that's so subtle, but yet it's so right there. It's brilliant. Well, anyway, back to that bus scene. When they get on, they're looking at an advertisement for underwear. And I never noticed that one guy's naked in that photograph and one guy has underwear on, which I thought was strange because in my mind, I thought it was an underwear advertisement. He says, is that what a man looks like? And Brad Pitt says, what's the line about?
Self-improvement is masturbation. Now, self-destruction.
Correct. Yes. But later on in the film, you see Edward Norton working out. Now, granted, he's working out to be part of Fight Club, but he is working out. And I thought to myself, that's kind of contradiction in terms because they're bashing on this image that they're giving advertisement looking at an advertiser, they're bashing on the fact that the advertisement is saying if you wear this kind of underwear or not, you'll look this way. And they're bashing on that. But yet they do everything they can do to be in shape to work out for Fight Club. And they mention when a guy starts Fight Club, he's a wad of cookie dough, but in a couple of weeks, he's chiseled out of wood. So there is this kind of contradiction in terms. Now, granted, one is for a purpose, subversive purpose of Fight Club, but the other one is, according to Brad Pitt's character, masturbation. I just think it's interesting that Fincher is got a multi-million-dollar budget, makes this movie that is about subversive ideas.
I think that line specifically, where he says self-improvement is masturbation, he's specifically talking about doing all of that, sculpting your body for a picture for a Gucci ad is completely self-serving. Like it's serving yourself as the model and Gucci as the advertiser, because the reason, because you looking good in that ad is going to make some random dude want to buy Gucci underwear. But when he's saying self-destruction, because that's the one thing that kind of comes to the fore in the fight clubs themselves, is that in the same way that in the support groups, you're there to listen to other people. You're giving of yourself, you're giving of your time, and you're giving of your energy to interact with them. In the same way, you are allowing yourself, to be beat up by someone else in the fight club as a form of therapy for that person. So that was the connection that I drew between the two things. So the aggressor in Fight Club is getting a benefit from someone else who's selflessly giving of themselves, in the same way that the other people in the sport group are selflessly giving of themselves. So that's the benefit, I guess, of the Fight Club. It's not necessarily like, the ability to beat up somebody. So I think that was maybe their whole point with that line. But the problem comes where you try to have anarchy, and you try to eschew all values of society, and what ends up happening is people want a leader. They want a structure, and he creates this. They create this Fight Club structure because, you could say that they create it because because the Tyler Durden character in the film and in the book has a particular focus, and the focus is to shake up his life, to shake up Jack's life. But there's collateral damage, and there's all these other people who get wrapped up in it, and it gets so out of hand that people start getting killed. And that's when this whole anarchy thing falls apart. There's, without any kind of societal structure, bad things happen. So as much as you want to, rail against the man, there still needs to be some kind of a structure, or else people are gonna just die randomly for no good reason, because a cop kills them because they're rolling a corporate art ball down a ramp. It's like, it was pointless, and Robert Paulson gets killed. Big Bob gets killed. I think people probably look at the first half of the film and they're like, yeah, Fight Clubs are awesome, and then they kind of forget about the last third of the film, that whole last section where it just goes haywire. But especially people who created all these Fight Clubs, it's like you kind of miss the point of the film. But
yeah, I agree.
People will take what they will. It doesn't help that the trailers that they cut lean heavily on, like, this is like an action movie, and there's all kinds of stuff going on, and people fight each other, in a basement. You can't consolidate the concepts of this film into a trailer. But at the same time, for 20th Century Fox to make their money back, they had to get butts in the seats. So it's really confusing. So,
well, see, that's why I wouldn't even begin to understand of how to be a producer of a film and talk about distribution, because in the end, you make these creative projects to make money. But if you don't allow people to see what they need to see to get into the film and sit down, you're right. The butts aren't in the seats. But at the same time, it's been proven over and over again that when you allow a film to be honest to itself, people come anyway. So and the more you hide it or the more you try to advertise it so you can get people into the theater and then it turns out to not be what they're expecting it to be, that always works against a film. So I'm always confused why they don't just honestly advertise these films, because the people who are attracted to that kind of thing are going to see it. And if it's a great film, it will become a money-making thing. Not always.
No, I think trailers have gotten better. I think people are a little bit more
I
savvy.
100%.
Yeah, there's a lot more trailers out there. I think there's probably a lot more movies out there. I can only imagine. I can't give a like empirical evidence that yes, there are more movies now than, well, not this year, but in a normal year around 2020, there are more movies now than in 1999. But I think that 1999 was that sweet spot. I also just read this book, Best Movie Year Ever, that came out a couple of years ago, and it talked exclusively about movies from 1999 because that was the author's concept, was that it was the best movie year ever. So it talked about, The Matrix, it talked about Fight Club, it talked about all of these movies. But really, I think that was like the sweet spot of because you got to remember, when did Spider-Man came out in 2001? So that was kind of like, I know X-Men happened, and X-Men happened in 2000. So it was this like pre-superhero thing that there was this, they were giving a lot of money to to these movies like Fight Club that had no previous intellectual property associated with them, other than a novel, obviously, but they had no bona fides other than just a book. So that's a rare sliver of history to be in. And since then, it's been all, we don't want to give you this much money because you don't have Spider-Man in your movie or you don't have Thor in your movie. It would not have been made, I think, I don't know, 5 years later, 10 years later, but.
And you can testify to this. I make these blanketed statements and then they ended up coming true. And then people were like, you never said that. Well, now that we have a podcast that's been recorded, most people don't believe that I predicted Olivia Colman to win. But now history has stated the fact that I was right. But it's not a matter about me being right or wrong. It's I have this kind of thing where I can a little bit. But I have this thing where I can go, I make these blanketed statements, right? And people are like, okay, yeah, right. I remember in 1999 saying to somebody who looked at me and went, whatever. I said 1999 is going to be considered one of the best years of films ever. Because didn't Magnolia come out in 1999 too? Was Magnolia 1999?
Election, Magnolia. Yep. It's just, there's so many movies that came out. Obviously, The Matrix came out.
Yeah, it's a great year for movies. And I remember saying to myself, I think it's going to be an unprecedented year. And I don't think we'll see another year like it, because you don't often get, The Matrix was a huge blockbuster. Magnolia made a lot of money. Fight Club did okay. Fight Club caused a bigger stir than it made money, but it did okay. And I remember saying to somebody who did not like Fight Club, who was kind of like not arguing with me about it, but saying, it's a waste of time and it's the commercialization, all the things that we just said we really like about it, they hated about it. And I said, mark my words when I tell you it's going to go through cult status first, and then it's going to become a movie of a lifetime. And people will remember it as if it was really something more than what we're talking about right now. They're like, no way, that movie's going to be forgotten in the next 2 years. And I was like, mark my words, it will not be forgotten, because one, I love that movie and I'll never shut up about it. And two, it has something about it. It says more things in just this one movie than a lot of movies say in 3 or 4 movies. So I knew back then something wicked this way comes, if you will.
Yeah, and I think that David Fincher knew that they were going to give a bunch of money to, 20th Century Fox was going to give a bunch of money to make some movie. So they might as well give, the budget was $63 million. They might as well give $63 million to him to make this movie, to get some of these some of these ideas out there, and to kind of show not only the first level of like, question consumerism, but the second level of like, okay, now that you've questioned consumerism, what's the next step after that? Because real life isn't just concepts. Real life isn't just, wouldn't it be great if we didn't have large corporations? The real life is we have large corporations. Now, what's the next step? How do you, if you're going to fight against that, what do you do? Because what they do in this movie is not sustainable. It's not doable.
Well, they're still making these stories, though. This is what Mr. Robot is about. This whole idea of taking down or wiping away everybody's debt. Now, it's much more complicated in Mr. Robot because we're talking about computers all over the world holding databases that hold this information. So they have to knock
it's
out
not centralized. It's not centralized like it was in 1999.
Yeah, it's not. What was the card catalogs in old libraries? You probably don't even remember those.
Oh yeah, the Dewey Decimal System. Yeah,
the Dewey Decimal System. Yes, love it.
Oh yeah.
Yes, the library I grew up in still has their little area, but it's more just like a display case. You can't open the little shelves anymore or anything like that, or little compartments anymore. But they have it, and I think it's been like sealed shut and it's been glossed over and all that other stuff to just reserve it. Or preserve it, I guess is the word I'm looking for. But what I was going to ask you, when did Seven come out? Seven came out a couple years before Fight Club.
1995.
Right. See, I think that's why they gave David Fincher money. Because if you had told anybody in 1993 that this guy's going to make this movie with basically one of the biggest stars of the world, who definitely was known by name, but really wasn't a huge blockbuster star, and another guy who was an upcoming star, and it was going to be about a serial killer who used the Seven Deadly Sins as their murder themes, people have been like, what? No, not going to happen. And then meet David Fincher and him tell you what his tone and attitude toward the film was going to be and what his thumbprint on that film was going to be. You'd be like, no way is anybody going to make that movie. And no way is that going to make any movie. That was a huge hit. People loved that movie. So I think that's probably, I bet you David Fincher would not have been able to make Fight Club if it wasn't for Seven, because it was kind of sketchy for him up to that point. And then Seven was a huge hit. And Brad Pitt was not a movie star name at the time. And Morgan Freeman was known, but he wasn't Mr. Blockbuster. He's not like Tom Cruise or somebody back then. And that was still in the 2 decades of a star's name like Tom Cruise really meant.
Yeah.
I think a lot more than it does now, in my personal opinion.
Well, it's funny. The one name you picked is the wrong name. Tom Cruise. People will go see a Tom Cruise movie, but
yeah, I was just gonna say, as soon as it came out of my mouth, I was like, "Oh, he's the worst example." What I'm talking
I don't think
about.
people would go to see a Brad Pitt movie right now. I don't think people would go to see a Tom Hanks movie right now. I just for the fact that is those people. That is the name that's on the top of the marquee. But I do think they will go see a Tom Cruise movie because he's going to freaking space. Like the guy, he just can't be stopped. Nobody saw The Mummy, so that's one thing, I guess.
I did.
You did? Okay. Yeah.
Not as bad as everybody says it is, but I'm always like that.
And it's got Sophia Boutella, right? It's got from she was in Atomic Blonde and in The Kingsman. Yeah. She's good.
I like her. I liked her, but I thought she was miscast. But anyway,
I did want to bring up a couple of things that we haven't talked about as far as like the kind of behind the scenes types of people. It seems like David Fincher really likes to work with legacy people behind the camera, because he's worked with both Conrad Hall's son, whose name is also Conrad Hall, and Jeff Cronenweth is the guy who shot Fight Club, but his dad Jordan Cronenweth shot like Blade Runner. I mean, he's famous, but Conrad Hall is like a super famous cinematographer from way back in the 60s, 70s. And so the Cronenweth father-son, setup is also a kind of a famous father-son. So he likes to work with those guys. And Jeff Cronenweth has worked with Fincher ever since. He did, Social Network, Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, I don't think that he did Panic Room, but that was a whole nother thing. They had Darius Kanji for Panic Room, and then Fincher fired him for some reason. But speaking of amazing Blu-rays, or not Blu-rays, but DVDs, Panic Room, I've got this 3-disc set of Panic Room, and it is insane. And maybe it's 4 discs. I think there's like 3 separate discs, just about like they break it up into pre-production, production, and post-production. And it's like I mean, it's hours. It's probably, I don't know, 10, 12 hours of specials and featurettes on like all the way from, concepts and animatics to building the set and shooting, out to the CGI and stuff that they did for Panic Room. I mean, it is amazing. You can spend days digging into Panic Room. That probably has a lot to do with my love of David Fincher, is the fact that he's willing to allow people in, and he's willing to, I don't know if he's showing off or what, but I'm eating it up. I learned so much watching all of the special features from all of his movies, and he still does it even with his newer movies. Social Network has a great like 3-hour or 2-hour behind the scenes thing. I mean, it's just amazing stuff that he like lets you behind the curtain, and I think that it's so cool, and it's great for. I mean, I'm sure it's great for people who are interested in getting into the industry too. It's some kind of like straight from the horse's mouth information to glean from, on top of, just getting out there and shooting your own stuff.
Well,
So,
that Panic Room DVD and extras is the first thing that you lent to me, and I
oh
remember
yeah,
watching almost all of it. And I think I did watch almost all of it, if not all of it. And I was amazed that they built that house. They actually built that
yeah,
street
so
and that
cool.
house, and I was like, wait, what's happening here? I
Hmm.
mean, the whole thing. I thought a lot of it was CGI, but it's not. And there's a couple of shots that you think are CGI, but they're not. And you see them planning all of those out. Fascinating stuff. And it's also fascinating
Mm.
because I think that when David Fincher's interviewed, he comes across very point blank blunt, which is off putting to some people. Not to me, because that's me in a
Mm.
nutshell. But on set, and when he's talking to Jodie Foster, and they're actually bouncing ideas off of each other, and he's explaining to her what's happening, and she's all about it because she's a director too. He has this very direct tone about him, but he's also got this tone of giddiness about him, that he's happy to be doing what he's doing. He's no nonsense.
Hmm.
There's a conversation and somebody's kind of like wasting his time. He's like, okay, you figure that out. I'm going to go back to work. And to some people that might be off-putting, but I kind of appreciate that, because what they do takes so much energy, and the creative process takes so much energy, that sometimes you really can't play into everybody's little drama about whatever it is. And so it's interesting to hear him talk about his own films, because he definitely has this tone of, I want to say giddiness, but it's almost he's happy to do what he's doing. He's thrilled to be doing what he's doing, but it's very steeped in professionalism too. And I appreciate that. And to actually listen to him, the
Hmm.
way that he talks to people, I think he's kind of gotten a bad reputation in
Hmm.
some way, but none of that is representative in those DVD extras. So it's always good to see that, because you get a personalized look at how these people work. And I love that about him.
Yeah, and I think that you can really tell, I mean, kind of getting back to the whole book versus movie thing, you can really tell that not only did the screenwriter Jim Uhls have to go through and kind of like he even said that he would highlight portions of the book and be like, I definitely want to keep this in. I want this whole paragraph, I want this to be in the movie, and then, figure out other stuff that he can work around or move around or consolidate. But he also, just in listening to that commentary, Polinick would be like, "Oh, hey, well that was a great line," and he'd be like, "Oh, actually, I didn't write that line. It was," and in a lot of the whole scene at the bar where, do you know what a duvet is? The Martha Stewart stuff, that wasn't written by Jim Uhls. Like, that was retooled by David Fincher, Brad Pitt, and Edward Norton doing rehearsals in a room for a week or 2 weeks or something like that, just getting to help shape the characters. You kind of see that in the special features, that special feature documentary in Social Network, where it's like Andrew Garfield, Jesse Eisenberg, and then I guess it's David Fincher and Aaron Sorkin just all around a table, and they just have like certain shots of them just kind of talking out the going through certain lines and talking out the script. But you can definitely tell that David Fincher he's like coming at Aaron Sorkin. He's being like, I don't understand this line. This doesn't make sense here. Like this is redundant. Like there's too much extra stuff here. And then he's going after Aaron Sorkin, the award-winning playwright, successful screenwriter, the not yet Academy Award-winning screenplay writer of this film, and he's challenging him on it. He's not doing it in a mean way. He's focused on getting the script to be the best that it is before they get to the set, or before they get on location, so that when they get there, he can make the best decisions to make the best film, so that when he gets in the editing room, he can make the best decisions, and on and on and on. It's everybody's on the same team, and they're all working towards the same goal. And it seems like maybe there are probably some times when he's a little bit more blunt than some people might want him to be, but it's not because he doesn't like Aaron Sorkin. It's because he's just trying to make it better. So I don't have a problem with that.
Well, what's interesting to me is that if they were talking about construction work, or if they were talking about IT work, or if they were talking about engineering, there would be none of that assumption that you would have to be nice to each other. Not that you're not nice to each other, but complete professional bluntness. And I don't know why blunt is necessarily a bad term always. It's not. But there's none of that apology in any other field. If you're employed as a general manager like I was at Honey Baked Ham, and I'm saying, hey, you need to do that this way, it doesn't work that way. Why are you doing it that way? Okay, yeah, that doesn't work. Do it this way. There's no apology for that, because you're just doing your job. But because this is such an emotional field and such a creative thing, that people assume you have to be a certain way. And if you're anywhere but completely just the nicest guy in the whole entire world, you're Tom Hanks all the time. I'm sure Tom Hanks is very direct and very blunt when he doesn't like something. And because he is at a point where he has 2 Oscars back to back, and he is a huge box office star, and now has had his umpteenth Academy Award nomination after 20 some odd years of not having one, people listen because he is at a point in the game where he knows what he's talking about. Why people have to apologize for that, I'll never know. I don't know where you want to go, but I do want to get to something that was in the book that was semi-different than what was in the movie, and why I thought it was interesting, and also things that were said about the scene in the movie. And then when I read the book again, I went, oh, well, that's interesting, because that solves the problem that most people had with the scene. So the scene where they're in the car, and they leave the bar and they get in the car, and a guy gets out and he says, don't worry, sir, it's long-term parking. And apparently this guy was a valet for a airport parking lot or garage, and he stole this car so Tyler Durden and Jack and these 2 other Project Mayhem guys can go driving down the road in. And Tyler starts to talk about really letting go. Let go. I love that, how Brad delivers that line. And he talks about, you're only pretending to really go over the edge, all that dialogue, which is completely like it. The dialogue is exactly the same in the book, except for it's a different character. It's not the Tyler Durden character that Brad Pitt is playing in the book. It's somebody called the Cowboy. And what was interesting about that was because back in the day when the movie first came out and people were challenging me about my love for it, somebody said to me at a party once, well, how does that scene even exist? And I said, what do you mean? And he goes, well, knowing what you know about the end of the movie, and knowing that they're one and the same, and that it's a split personality type of thing, or it is a split personality thing, how is the guys in the back not reacting to him talking to himself? Like, are they reacting to him talking to himself? And I never thought twice about it until I reread the book, because in the book, he is talking to somebody else. He's talking to the cowboy. He's not talking to himself. He's talking to an actual character. And I thought, well, that's interesting. There is a shot in that scene. It's a great scene, first of all. And it's shot and reads almost exactly like the book, with the exception of they run into a car parked on the side of the road, I guess an emergency vehicle on the side of the road, a car that's pulled over in the emergency lane. In the book, they hit the car hits the back of the truck that is coming towards them, and that's how they go over the cliff or go over the side of the road. So there's a little bit of difference there. But there is a shot of the two Project Mayhem guys in the back when he's talking to himself. And I can't remember who says what, but it's a shot of them going, who's this guy talking to?
Yeah, they're very confused.
Yeah, it is in that scene. And I thought, I wish I had known that 20 years ago. I would have found yet another reason to defend this movie, because I find it interesting that it's one person in the book, but yet doesn't it make 100% the right choice to put Tyler Durden in that scene? It makes perfect sense, because that's essentially what he's telling him, that you need to completely let go. And in the book, there's a birthday cake on the seat of the car. And when they flip over and they get out of the car, he says he tastes blood and metal and birthday cake. And then the cowboy says, "Happy birthday, sir," because that's the moment that he switches over to really just letting go. And I thought, oh, that's interesting, because in the book, that's his new birthday. That's the new time he is a new person. He has transitioned from one person to the next. Fascinating. And it's interesting to me that they got the same.
That's cool.
Yeah, they got the same sense out of it without doing anything with the birthday cake.
No, that is really cool. What about the two murders in the book that just aren't in the movie?
When I was reading,
he kills his boss, which is,
it's interesting, because when I was reading the book, I was like, I don't remember that. And do they do any true violent thing to anybody else? The answer is no.
Well, no, they kill the envoy of recycling or whatever, special envoy of recycling.
In the book.
In the book, yeah.
Okay, that's what I'm saying. In the movie, they don't kill anybody. In the movie, they don't really cut anybody's testicles off. But this time that I watched,
that's right.
Because there's a refrigerator full or a freezer full of people who didn't do what they wanted them to do. Instead of just cutting rubber band, they cut other things. And he doesn't want Marla in the book. He doesn't want Marla to go into the freezer, because she'll see, don't eat anything in the freezer, he says, because it's a bunch of people's testicles. And in the movie, when the three policemen closer to the end say, we need to take him, sir. You said you were going to say you weren't Tyler Durden and all this other stuff, and you said you were going to do this, blah, blah, blah. And those three cops, one of them says something along the lines of, he says something that gives you the impression they have done this before. And then I thought, well, does he really say that? Or am I reading into it because I read the book? But then the one guy says, is anybody timing this? And in the book, they talk about how it took 9 minutes the first time and 4 minutes the second time and 3 minutes this time. And then somebody says, is anybody timing this? When they go after the one guy that they go after in the book and the movie, same character, basically. But in the movie, one of the cops at the end says, is anybody timing this? So that alludes to the fact that they have done this before and they have actually gone through with it. But as for the violence that happens in the book, it's not in the movie. More violence happens to them via Fight Club and Bob getting his head shot off than anybody else. And then what they call Angel Face, Jared Leto's character, that's pretty violent. And the way he ends up, he looks pretty bad. I wanted to destroy something beautiful. I love that. But you're right. There is much more pronounced violence in the book.
So it's a lot more severe in the book than it is in the movie. So, I mean, and it's probably, they're probably trying not to lose sight of the forest for the trees or whatever that phrase is. They're probably just trying to focus more on the main plot points because they have less time, but it also pulls up short on some of the the detrimental effect of creating a Project Mayhem.
Well, no, but you do get those themes though, because you do get the impression that he's trying to stop this. Edward
Yeah.
Norton or Jack is trying to stop this in the movie, and he travels all the way through what Tyler has already traveled through to try to put a stop to everything. And so I guess you're supposed to know that things are happening in the movie that they just didn't have time to go into, that they are willing to do to keep this going on. But you're right, it's about a mindset. And at a certain point, the whole idea of Fight Club, and his name was Robert Paulson, takes over, and it's no longer controllable. And be careful of what you wish for, because anarchy is one thing, but then once it takes over, then where are you going to end up? I want to talk about another real quick scene that happens closer to the beginning of the film, and I just thought it was interesting because it was added into the movie and is not in the book. And it is one of my favorite scenes in the movie too, when the mobster guy Lou comes down into the basement. He's the owner of Lou's Tavern. I always called him a gangster because the guy who's with him, who pulls out the gun, is wearing a leather coat, and they both talk like they're from New York, and they both look like gangsters. So for some odd reason, I always thought they were gangsters, or mobsters, if you will. But it's not necessarily there. It's just the impression I got of them. So I always thought they were the mob. But anyway, his name's Lou, and Tyler Durden basically allows him to beat him up in order to use the basement of his restaurant. And in the book, it's different. The book, it's the taverns and the clubs and the dance halls or wherever they're having Fight Club like it, because the night before Fight Club, the place is packed. And they actually talk about how they made their month's rent in one night, the night before Fight Club. Then the next night after Fight Club, the place is dead. So actually, the clubs and places where Fight Club is taking place like Fight Club taking place, because it brings money to their institution. And I thought, oh, that's interesting. And I don't know if you recall this, but money is actually more of an issue in the book than it is in the movie. He actually has to pay rent at the Paper Street house, and he actually earns a paycheck. They both earn separate paychecks, well, seemingly separate paychecks. He talks about his savings account, or his checking account is overdrawn, meaning Jack, the narrator, or Joe, the narrator, his bank account is overdrawn, and then you find out later on it's because Tyler Durden is writing checks on his name and so forth and so on. But money needs to be earned. And that's another thing that's different from the book to the movie, that when Jack does the single fighting in front of his boss and then blames his boss for beating him up, and that he goes, that's how we got corporate sponsorship for Fight Club. We're able to have Fight Club every night of the week. I got a fax, I got a phone, I got 52 paychecks. I love that. In the book, it's two separate things that happen. It's not that boss, it's the banquet boss. Jack blackmails the hotel owner by saying, if you don't give me my paycheck and leave me alone, I'm going to tell the newspapers that so-and-so ate my you-know-what. And that's how he gets money from them. And then Tyler Durden does the same thing to the projectionist manager. And he goes to the projectionist manager and says, I tell you what, all of those people don't know they were affected, but I will tell the newspapers that I did this stuff, and then they will remember, and then you'll be in big trouble and you'll be sued and blah, blah, blah. So give me my paychecks. That's how they end up getting corporate finger quote sponsors for Fight Club. And I thought, it's so interesting how, what's the screenwriter's name of Fight Club?
Jim Uhls.
So interesting how he blended those things together in one single scene and got everything you need to know about that in one single scene. And it's one of the greatest scenes in the film, when Edward Norton is beating himself up. And they do that still shot, and he goes, for some reason I thought of my first fight with Tyler. And then he goes and smashes himself into the bookshelf and all that stuff. I thought it was fascinating how precise that one scene was written. It just encapsulates those two characters, if you will, in two different situations in one 5-minute scene in a movie and you understand everything and it's all taken care of. I'm like, wow, it's so interesting to read all of those details in a book, but it's fascinating to me that you can sense and feel and get the same vibe in 5 minutes that you can get in 2 chapters of a book. That's to
Yeah.
me the sign of a great screenwriter because I got both
Yeah.
of the senses, the sense of that both of those characters in that one scene.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And you have a lot less time to do all of that. So it's finding ways to wrap all those into one, or to take those large pieces and consolidate them down. I mean, it's really important. But I think that having in the book the fact that they already have to go out and they've already got the assignment of losing a fight. It's a kind of like a quote unquote off screen thing where he has that assignment. But the Lou, it seems like Lou beating him up has spurred on this, like, okay, now we're gonna take Fight Club up another notch, because before that they didn't have homework assignments and now they do. Whereas in the book it's like, oh, there's already been homework assignments at the point in which the narrator describes the homework assignments to you and talks about how, oh, people put the homework assignments in a they write on a piece of paper and put them in a bowl, and then if Tyler looks at them, and if he doesn't like one, he throws it out and then puts in a blank one. I mean, they go through all this stuff, and it works for the book, but in the movie, this is so much better because it's a cause and effect that helps with us as an audience believing the fact that, like, he didn't just like randomly come up with this. He's trying to see a benefit, or you're trying to get a benefit out of this situation that just happened. And also,
Yeah, but
it's also a way to recruit new members, because like you said, with the priest who beats up one of the guys. Actually, he beats up Holt what's his name? Holt McCallany. McCallany, who is in Mindhunter, another David Fincher movie.
yeah, I like that
So
guy.
yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
he beats him up, and then of course you see him right after in the next scene where he's in Fight Club.
Let me tell you what I realized about the Lou scene this time after reading the book. In the book, it mentions the gay plague and AIDS, and because the book was written right in the middle of that, and that's not mentioned in the movie at all, except for in the Lou scene. And it's mentioned in such a way that you either get it or you don't, because when Brad Pitt jumps on top of him and starts to spew his blood into his face, he goes, "You don't know where I've been, Lou. You
Mm.
don't know where I've been." It alludes to the fact that Lou is going to be worried that blood has exchanged from one man to another man's body, and that because of AIDS, there's a possibility he could get that. Now, I'm not saying that's why it was written, but that's what I got from it the this time that I watched it, because I thought that's a really great way of putting that in there, because anybody with blood and bodily fluids in that time frame would have been aware of that situation and actually should be still aware of it. But back in the mid 80s to the early 90s, 95ish at some point, that was still a prominent thing. So I don't know if you got
Mm.
that, but I just thought that
Mm.
that was interesting. It was a way to kind of put it in there without making it a subject for this particular movie.
Wow.
Not that they shouldn't or should, but they didn't, but it was there. And I'm sure that when people see that scene, they think about AIDS when they see what Brad Pitt does.
The Marla character, did her character change much between the book and the movie?
Other than the mother thing, I don't think so. And she is the only one. Helena Bonham Carter is the only one that I see from the movie when I read the book.
Mm.
And I've
Mm.
read the book twice. When I saw the movie first before I read the book.
Yeah.
And I see her every time I read the book. I don't really see Brad Pitt or Edward Norton because of the way that the dialogue is written and the way that the narrator talks about himself to us feels different than the way Edward Norton talks. It's like Edward Norton is talking about a general situation in the movie.
Mm.
This is how we started Fight Club. This is, we all eventually did what Tyler wanted us to do. In Tyler, we trust. In the book, it's different. The narrator talks as if he's a friend of yours and like you know him. and that you and I did this together. It's a weird, different tonal change. So I don't really.
Well, it's in first person, right? I mean, isn't it in first person when he's
Yeah, I guess.
yeah, when he's
Yeah,
using
yeah,
when they're using the voiceover or the direct address to camera in the movie, it's giving you exposition or like, you know, telling you what Tyler Durden does to the seafood bisque. It's not saying like, then I went downstairs and then I got a cup of coffee. It's not that. It's talking about other things, or talking about, you know, you wake up in SeaTac, or, you know, whatever, you know, Pacific time,
right,
mountain
right,
time, change your clock.
right.
That's not the first person way that the book is written. So I can see that. I can see that being separate and different. But Marla's character, he describes Marla on the voiceover in the same way that he describes her in the book. So yeah, that makes sense.
Yep. And almost all of her dialogue is the exact same thing from the book, all the way down to what she orders at the restaurant at the end. She
Yep.
orders clam chowder, fried chicken, potato all the way,
A
and
pie, some kind of pie,
chocolate
chiffon
chiffon.
pie. Yep.
Chocolate chiffon, right. All the way down to that. Why is it free? All the way down. And that's why I think, plus it's Helena Bonham Carter, the way she delivers a line is so specific, and it's just, they're all dead on. There's no doubt about it. But they all have very interesting dialects too.
Mm.
We've talked about Brad Pitt, and you said that it's his Midwestern dialect. It's almost, he clips his words in a way that is interesting. It's almost like his consonants happen a split second after they're supposed to. I don't know how to explain it. I love it. I think he's brilliant, and I think he's brilliant in this. But there's a couple of scenes when I was watching Fight Club again, going, and that's why you have an Oscar there, buddy. But yeah, Marla is almost identical, with the exception of there's a few things that are twisted around, but nothing major.
Mm.
All of her dialogue, the whole dress. I bought this dress for $1.
Yeah.
When she talks about when she comes down,
Someone loved it
after
intensely
being
for a
over.
day and then threw it away.
Yes, correct. Yes, the condom is the glass slipper of our generation.
Yep.
That whole scene. Well, the only difference is it's a blue dress in the book, and it's a pinkish beige color dress in the movie. But you get what it's supposed to be. You get that it's a bridesmaid's dress. So no, there's little to nothing that they do with Marla that's not almost exactly the same. And in a way, that is an ode to the writer of the book, when the character is so well written that why change it? There's no reason to. Now, they do add in things that are not in the book, not in the movie. Marla is at the Paper Street house a lot more. She has a lot more conversations with Joe/Jack than she does in the movie. There's much more of a separation of her character. They get to know each other more in the book than they do in the movie until close to the very end. But it adds to the narrative of the movie so well that she's confused, you're confused. Why is he acting one way? You don't know that she knows that he's acting one way at one moment and another way at another. You're thinking she's dealing with two different people. So that all bodes well. So here's my last question. I'm wondering, okay, and I guess maybe it's a rhetorical question. I'm wondering if I had read the book before the movie, or before seeing the movie, would I have picked up earlier on the fact that this was a split personality thing? Because I did not at all on any level pick up on it in the movie. And to this day, watching the movie again, I almost forget that they're two separate people. It's done so well. Now, there are a few differences in the book that I kind of like the way the movie did it better. And God, I just forgot the author's name. Chuck Palahniuk. For some reason, I couldn't think of it, and it's right in front of me. He said he likes the movie better than his book. Now, that might be just like a really kind of cool thing to say, but I could see why he would like the differences. In the book, Tyler Durden takes over when Joe/Jack falls asleep, closer to the end of the book. And that's when he does all of that stuff, which is what he does in the movie too. But you get the impression that he's one person during the day, and then at night he's a whole nother person in the book when he's asleep.
Mm-hmm.
In the movie, it's as if he's seeing himself and Tyler Durden at the same time. It's a tad bit different in the book. You get the impression that only these things are only happening when Jack is asleep, that this is why he has insomnia, which is also kind of in the movie too, because if you remember, right after that car scene and Jack falls asleep for a long period of time, Tyler Durden leaves and disappears.
Yep.
Tyler Durden only appears when he's going through insomnia. So there's like a little bit of difference in those things in the book and movie. But the question is, would I have known sooner in the book? Because there are some obvious clues in the book. Obvious clues. He says direct things like, he says those things that are Tyler's words coming out of my mouth. Tyler spoke for me. I just repeated him. He does that in the movie too. But I'm wondering, would I have picked up on it quicker? And I can't think of the specific thing, that there's one specific thing in the book and I can't remember what it is. I guess it can't be specific if I don't remember it. But there's one thing that he does that I think if I was reading it for the first time, and you can't really say this, but I think I would have thought, is this guy a split personality thing going on here? What's going on here? Like, why is he saying that? In the movie, it's nowhere until it is right there in your face. What do you think? Do you think you would have known?
I don't know. I mean, I'm not used to getting tricked in books, I guess. So I've definitely watched more movies than I've read books or, fiction books. But yeah, I don't think so. I think that I would have been caught as off guard as, I think that in a movie, it's easier to get shocked because you have the ability to use sound and images, whereas in a book, it's literally like words that you're reading, and depending on how fast you're reading the words, or the filmmaker has control over how that information is given to you, whereas in a book, you have control over how that information is given to you. So yeah, I don't know, that would be difficult. But just the fact that like when he realizes it, you hear the soundtrack go boo, and then he says we've now lost cabin pressure, and he falls back against the bed. Like, all of those things together have a much bigger impact than just reading we've now lost cabin pressure. It's just, I don't know. I like it in the movie better than in the book.
Well, did you see it coming in the movie the first time you saw it?
No. Oh, no.
Yeah. I'm pretty good with that kind of stuff. Like I said earlier on in the podcast, I usually can figure out something's not right. I might not be able to put my finger on it, but I usually can say, what was that all about? Why did they say that? What is happening here? That looked weird. That seems out of step with something. And then when the reveal happens, I go, that's why I was feeling that way. I'm not saying I knew what the reveal was, but that's why. I mean, I did see what was coming in The Usual Suspects way before it happened.
Oh, you're kidding me, man.
No, I'm telling you. I'm telling you. I'm telling you. Ask my buddy Terry.
Well,
I spoke about him a couple weeks ago. I'm telling you, he was shocked by it. I went, blah, blah, blah. And he was like, no way. And I was like, yep, knew it.
Well, the closest I've gotten to that was the first episode of Tales from the Loop. I was watching it with Steph, and I was like, yep. And then turns out I was right. So
yeah, it's interesting.
And
right?
it was pretty early on. I'm sure we'll talk about Tales from the Loop at some point, but it was pretty early on. I was pretty proud of myself. But that's in some ways you can be proud of yourself, but then at the same time it's kind of like, well, then it shouldn't be that easy. But yeah.
No, that's never how I feel. I always feel like, is this what it is? Is this what it is? It is what it is. I knew it. And I'm proud of myself. And I think it's clever that they kept me guessing all the way up to it, even though I had figured it out. I never look at it that way. I remember watching The Sixth Sense, knowing something. I was having a sense that something was weird. There are a few scenes in that movie that I remember the first time I saw it, I went, wait, what was that?
That came out in 1999 too.
There you go. There you go. Toni Collette's first Oscar nomination year, only Oscar nomination year. That right there should put the precedence on it being one of the most important years of movies. Yeah, that's a great year, right? Green
Hmm.
Mile too. Is that year too?
I believe so, yeah.
It's also fascinating for me, even after 20 years of watching this movie, to see the little clues that are spread throughout the movie. And by the way, back in the day when it was VHS, and told somebody, I think I saw little flashes of somebody standing by that Xerox machine. I think I saw a flash of somebody walking down the alleyway, and they were like, "You're crazy." And I thought, "Am I crazy? Did I really edit this movie in my own head?" Because you find out later on that Brad Pitt does that for a living. He edits things into, well, it doesn't do that for a living, but because he does that for a living, he can do other things to movies, editing pornography into films. And I thought, did I see that and make that up in my head and it become part of my imagination? And I remember the very first time I rented that film and I was like, wait, I know I just saw something. And I slowed it down and I was like, aha, it is really there. Do you know how many people did not believe that was really happening when it happened? Even
Really? Huh.
after I was telling, yeah, people were like, I didn't see that. And I would have to point it out to them and slow it down for them. Because if you're not paying attention to it, there's a couple of times it's in pretty much center of the frame.
Yeah.
At the Xerox machine, it's right there. And then the fourth one is the alleyway.
The fourth one's the alleyway, and it's covering over Marla.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like,
She's,
okay, this is what's
yeah.
happening. I'm coming up
Yeah.
because you like this girl.
Yeah. A lot of people miss that though. They don't
Mm.
see it. And I think I saw it the first time I saw the movie, but really just thought it was, I don't know what I thought it was.
Did you see him in the TV at the hotel? He's one of the guys who says welcome when they do the like TV thing in the hotel, saying like, here's where the pool is and here's where the
I remember that. That's Tyler Durden's in that?
he's in the far right front row. Yep.
Really? Like
Yep.
when you see all others with their tuxes on and all that other stuff.
With their like
With their,
their white
yeah,
coats and
yeah,
they all kind of like
yeah.
hold their arms out and they say welcome.
Tyler Durden's in that shot. Oh, it's funny because when I watched it this time, I looked to see if there were any familiar faces, but I guess I didn't see it quick enough. But no, I've never seen that. See, 20 years. You gotta love it. That says something about a movie right there.
That's pretty cool.
Well, there is one real quick thing. In the book, there's a whole chapter about Project Mayhem. I'm not sure if it's Project Mayhem or there's different projects. Project
Hmm.
Disruption and all that other stuff. And there are folders on the wall in the movie that are named those different projects, but they don't specifically talk about them in the movie. But one of those Project Mayhems or Disruptions or whatever make bumper stickers that say things like "Recycle your pets." It's a play on recycling and spade
Yeah.
pet and all that other stuff. It's on the bumper of the car that they flip over. There is a shot of the back of the car in the movie, and there's a bumper sticker that says "Recycle your pets." And I thought, see, I
Ah,
like things like that. There are small because
that's
everybody who
cool.
read that book, who loved that part of that chapter, are like, "Where are the bumper stickers at, man? Where are the bumper stickers?" And then boom, there it is. But
Hmm.
it's just done
Yep.
very quickly, and it's an ode to the book. But at the same time, it's also one of those little details that adds to the movies.
It's the same thing as with the Valley of the Dolls. Like there's no reference to Valley of the Dolls in the movie at all, except for her singing that, humming that gotta get off, singing that song from Valley of the Dolls. But he peppers in Valley of the Dolls in the book all over the place, except Valley of the Dogs
Right.
and subverts that and kind of like messes around with that. But it's not mentioned at all in the movie, but somehow it just fits. But
But I think that's brilliant.
it's cool though.
I just find it interesting that a movie can over 2 decades can still grab my imagination, and a book can complement it, add to it, and vice versa.
That's pretty cool. All right. Well, you can check us out on the web at actorandengineer.com. You can go to facebook.com/actorandengineer, and you can tweet us at actorengineer. And we'll see you next time.